She was just a quiet black girl in a school where money and privilege ruled. No one stood up for her. No one stopped the cruelty. But when the rich, arrogant bully crossed the line, he had no idea. She wasn't as powerless as he thought. Stay with us as we reveal how one girl's silent strength changed everything and exposed the harsh truth about racism, power, and justice. So, he decided to break her. He was going to humiliate her in front of the entire school, make sure she never forgot her place. And that's when he crossed the line. What Tyler didn't know, what no one in that school knew, was that Jasmine wasn't as powerless as she seemed. And the moment he made his next move would be the moment his world fell apart. Jasmine Carter had always known that staying quiet was her best weapon. At 14 years old, she had already learned a painful truth. When you're different, when you're black in a place where you're not wanted, the world expects you to break. But she wouldn't give them that satisfaction. She had spent months enduring Tyler Dawson's taunts, the whispers in the hallways, the judgmental glances from students who thought they were better than her. She had watched the way teachers ignored what was happening, the way even the so-called good students chose silence over speaking up. She had seen it all, but she never reacted. When Tyler bumped into her in the hallway, knocking her books to the floor, she picked them up, dusted them off, and kept walking. When he and his friends mocked her hair, making jokes about how it was too wild for their standards, she ran her fingers through her curls and carried on. When he sneered at her in the cafeteria, saying, "Bet your parents barely scraped enough money together for tuition," she just looked at him. No fear, no anger, just an unreadable expression. That drove him crazy, because Tyler needed a reaction. He needed to see her upset, to see her hurt, to see proof that his words held power over her. But Jasmine, she never gave him that power. That didn't mean she wasn't angry. She was. She felt the sting of every insult, the weight of every time she had to swallow her pride just to make it through the day. She felt the frustration of knowing that no matter what she did, people like Tyler would always believe she didn't belong. But she had learned something far more valuable than revenge. Silence wasn't weakness. It was control. It was knowing that she could let them say whatever they wanted, because in the end, it wouldn't matter. Because Jasmine Carter wasn't some scared girl waiting to be saved. She was waiting for the right moment, waiting for the day when Tyler Dawson would finally cross the one line he couldn't come back from. And when that moment came, she wouldn't have to do a thing, because someone else was already watching. And the lesson Tyler was about to learn would be one he'd never forget. Tyler Dawson thought he ruled Riverside Academy. He believed that no matter what he did, there would never be consequences. He had humiliated dozens of students before, pushing them to the edge, making them feel small, and every single time he got away with it. Why would Jasmine Carter be any different? She was just another scholarship kid, a black girl in a school where money and status meant everything. She had no powerful friends, no connections. She was just a quiet nobody who thought she could ignore him. But what Tyler didn't know was who he was really messing with, because Jasmine Carter wasn't as alone as she seemed. Her father, Richard Carter, was a name that people in the city whispered about but never spoke too loudly. He wasn't the kind of rich man who flaunted his wealth, but he owned half the commercial real estate in town. He didn't just make money, he controlled who made money. And unlike Henry Dawson, who threw money around to solve problems, Richard Carter didn't waste words. Tyler had no idea that the girl he had been tormenting for months was the daughter of a man who could destroy everything his family had built with a single phone call. Jasmine never mentioned it. She didn't brag about her father's power. She didn't drop hints or try to use his name for protection. She let Tyler believe whatever he wanted, because she knew his arrogance would be his downfall, and Tyler was walking straight into a disaster he couldn't see coming. The night after Tyler publicly humiliated Jasmine in the cafeteria, something strange happened. His phone started glitching. The group chat where he and his friends had laughed about the incident? Gone. The Instagram post mocking Jasmine, filled with racist comments? Deleted? Even the private messages between him and his closest friends? Wiped clean. He tried logging into his accounts, but an error message appeared. This account no longer exists. At first, he laughed it off. Maybe it was just a tech issue. Maybe the school found out and removed the posts. But then he noticed something else. Some of his friends, the ones who always cheered him on, were avoiding him. They weren't laughing anymore. They were whispering, glancing at him like they knew something he didn't. And then, at exactly midnight, his father's phone rang. Henry Dawson, a man who had never feared anything in his life, answered. The voice on the other end was calm. Too calm. "Henry, I think it's time we had a talk about your son." The moment those words were spoken, Tyler's fate was sealed. Because this was no longer just a schoolyard game. He had just stepped into a world where real power played by different rules. And now, he was about to find out what happens when you cross the wrong person. At exactly midnight, in the Dawson family's grand estate, the house was silent, except for the sudden, sharp ringing of Henry Dawson's private line. It was a number few people had, a number reserved for business partners, politicians, and people who knew the value of discretion. Henry answered, his voice calm but slightly irritated. "This is Henry Dawson." For a moment, there was only silence. But it wasn't the kind of silence that meant hesitation. It was the kind that made a man like Henry uneasy. Then a deep voice spoke. "Henry, I think it's time we had a talk about your son." Henry's grip on the phone tightened. He knew the voice instantly. Richard Carter, a name that held weight, a man who never wasted words. Henry sat up straight. The air in the room suddenly felt heavier. "Richard," he said carefully, "I wasn't expecting a call from you. What's this about?" There was no small talk, no pleasantries. Richard's voice remained steady, cold, absolute. "Your son has been harassing my daughter." Henry felt a slight chill. "Listen, Richard, they're just kids." "No." One word, sharp, final. "Your son has humiliated, harassed, and degraded my daughter for months, and yesterday he decided to make a public spectacle out of it." Henry swallowed hard. He wasn't used to feeling powerless, but there was something in Richard's voice, not anger, not threats, but certainty, that made his pulse quicken. I wasn't aware," Henry admitted, choosing his words carefully. "Then consider yourself aware now," Richard said. Another pause. Then in a voice calm enough to terrify any smart man, he continued. "Here's what's going to happen, Henry. Your son is going to leave my daughter alone. Forever. He will not speak to her, look at her, or even breathe in her direction." "And if he does?" Henry asked despite himself. Richard let out a slow breath. "If he does, you and I will have a very different kind of conversation, one you won't enjoy." The line went dead. Henry sat there staring at the phone in his hand. He had negotiated multi-million-dollar deals, handled lawsuits, crushed business rivals without a second thought. But this wasn't business. This was something else entirely. Henry knew men like Richard Carter didn't bluff. They didn't need to. And that was the moment Henry Dawson understood. This wasn't about Tyler anymore. This was about protecting his own empire from a man who could wipe it out with a single move. The next morning, Tyler didn't go to school. By the end of the week, the Dawson family was making arrangements to leave town. And just like that, the untouchable Tyler Dawson had disappeared. By the time Monday morning rolled around, something was different at Riverside Academy. The hallways, once filled with laughter, whispers, and Tyler Dawson's arrogant presence, felt eerily quiet. The usual crowd that followed Tyler like loyal subjects now looked lost, unsure of themselves. The students who once sneered at Jasmine Carter, who used to watch in amusement as Tyler tormented her, now avoided her gaze completely, because Tyler Dawson was gone. No one knew exactly what had happened. Some said his father had pulled him out of school for a family emergency. Others whispered that he had been expelled, though no official announcement had been made. And then there were the real rumors, the ones people were afraid to say out loud, that Tyler had messed with the wrong person, that Jasmine Carter wasn't as powerless as they thought, that someone had made him disappear. No one knew the truth, but it didn't matter, because the entire balance of power had shifted overnight. The fear no one spoke about. For the first time since Jasmine had walked into Riverside Academy, she wasn't invisible anymore. But it wasn't the kind of attention Tyler used to force on her. Now people moved out of her way in the hallways. The students who once laughed at Tyler's jokes now kept their heads down when she passed. Even the teachers, who had conveniently ignored what had been happening, suddenly started treating her with more respect. No one dared to mention Tyler's name. No one dared to ask Jasmine what she knew. And that was the real power. Jasmine hadn't needed to fight back with words or violence. She had simply survived long enough for the world to correct itself. Lena Parker's apology. On Wednesday, Lena Parker, one of Tyler's closest friends, approached Jasmine during lunch. She hesitated, shifting her weight from foot to foot, then finally spoke. "Hey, can I sit here?" Jasmine looked up at her unimpressed. Lena had never spoken to her before, unless it was to laugh along with Tyler. Jasmine didn't say yes, but she didn't say no either. Lena sat down, picking at her food before finally mumbling, "I didn't know Tyler was gonna, go that far." Jasmine raised an eyebrow. "Didn't you?" Lena swallowed hard. She knew there was no excuse, because the truth was she had known. She had just never cared until now. I wanted to say I'm sorry." Jasmine took a sip of water, then set her glass down. "Thanks for that," she said simply. Then she stood up and walked away. Because Lena's apology wasn't for Jasmine, it was for herself. Jasmine Carter had won. The entire school had changed, but Jasmine remained the same. She hadn't needed to seek revenge. She hadn't needed to become the bully. All she had needed to do was exist without breaking, and that was enough to make everyone else afraid. For the first time since stepping into Riverside Academy, Jasmine Carter felt the shift. Not in a loud, dramatic way, not in the way movies showed, where the underdog suddenly rises, defeats the villain, and walks away victorious. This was quieter, stronger, and far more permanent, because real power didn't come from fighting back. It came from never needing to. She hadn't won the way they expected. Jasmine didn't confront Tyler Dawson. She didn't start a rebellion, didn't demand justice, didn't even raise her voice. She had done nothing at all. And yet, the entire school had changed. The people who had once mocked her, who had stood by and done nothing, now avoided her gaze. The teachers who had ignored her for months suddenly treated her with quiet respect. Even the students who had never been part of Tyler's cruelty looked at her differently now. Not with pity, not with amusement, but with uncertainty. Because they knew the truth. They knew what happened to Tyler Dawson. And more importantly, they knew why. Power wasn't what she thought it was. For so long, Jasmine had believed that to stop people like Tyler, she had to be stronger than him. She had to fight back. She had to prove herself. But she had been wrong. Tyler had tried to control her, to break her, to make her feel small. But Jasmine never let him. And in the end, he was the one who disappeared, without a fight, without a confrontation, and that was true power. Lena Parker and the last apology. Lena Parker tried one last time. She had avoided Jasmine all week, but now at the end of the day, she finally gathered the courage to speak. "Jasmine, I wanted to say I'm sorry. Jasmine looked at her, expression unreadable. For what? She asked. Lena hesitated. For everything. I didn't think it would go that far. Jasmine tilted her head slightly. You mean, you didn't think there would be consequences? Lena's lips pressed together. Jasmine smiled. Not a cruel smile, a knowing one. You weren't sorry when you laughed, Jasmine said simply. You're just sorry you lost. Lena had no response. And Jasmine? She didn't need one. She walked away, leaving Lena standing alone. Just like she had left Jasmine all those times before. Jasmine was no longer the victim. She didn't need revenge. She didn't need validation. She had already won. And as she walked through the halls, every step she took was proof. Because now, she wasn't just some quiet girl Tyler Dawson had picked on. She was the girl no one dared to cross. By the time Monday morning arrived, it was clear. Riverside Academy would never be the same. Tyler Dawson was gone. No official announcement, no explanation, just vanished like he had never existed. And in his absence, something even more powerful remained. Jasmine Carter didn't have to fight to win. She walked through the hallways just like she always had. Calm, steady, quiet. But now, people moved aside when she passed. The students who had once whispered behind her back now lowered their heads. Even the teachers who had ignored what was happening for months acted differently. Because they knew what had happened. And more importantly, they knew who had made it happen. Fear had changed sides. Jasmine didn't seek revenge. She didn't threaten anyone. She didn't need to. The simple fact that she had survived, endured, and never broken was enough to make the whole school fear her in a way they never feared Tyler, because Tyler needed power to feel strong. But Jasmine, she had become strong without needing power at all. And that was the final victory. Jasmine Carter's story was never just about high school bullying. It was about power. It was about racism. And most importantly, it was about justice. Tyler Dawson never saw Jasmine as his equal. To him, she was just a quiet black girl, an easy target, someone he thought had no protection, no power, no voice. But he was wrong, because power doesn't always look the way people expect. Tyler had money, privilege, and the confidence of someone who had never faced consequences. But when the tables turned, none of that could save him. Jasmine didn't fight him. She didn't have to. She simply refused to break. And in the end, the world took care of the rest. Because real justice, it doesn't always come loudly. Sometimes justice is watching those who think they're untouchable learn the hardest lesson of all. And for Tyler Dawson, that lesson came too late. Jasmine Carter's story is more than just a tale of revenge or power. It's a story about endurance, justice, and standing tall in a world that tries to push you down. But now we ask you, what would you have done in Jasmine's place? Would you have fought back, stayed silent, trusted that justice would come? And more importantly, have you ever witnessed or experienced something similar? Let us know in the comments, because conversations about racism, power, and justice are more important now than ever. And sometimes the smallest voices carry the greatest strength.